What's up, Bengals fans? Anthony Cosenza here with CincyJungle.com, and this is the Orange and Black Insider. Just going to go through some headlines and whatnot with a lot of different things that have happened really over the course of the last handful of days since the Orlando Brown signing that was recently announced by the Cincinnati Bengals. They made some other moves on the offensive line, some moves to remedy some of the losses that they experienced in free agency, but kind of a lot to get to as we do kind of our news whip around show. And then our big one tomorrow, tentatively set to join us at 7 p.m. Eastern, in case you missed the if you did miss the announcement from our Twitter account. This big guy is set to join us tentatively tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. John Sheeran and myself will be talking with Orlando Brown Jr. and excited for that. So new free agency acquisition, one of the biggest ones the Bengals have ever made inside or outside of their own building. Really excited to be talking to him for a little bit tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll be doing a little bit of our first mock draft now that free agency. We don't do a ton on this show. A lot of other people do better ones than we do, but at any rate, yeah, we're pretty excited about that. So you'll want to join us tomorrow night for Orlando Brown Jr., hanging out with him and talking some Bengals football, doing a mock draft and whatnot. So excited about that. All right, let's get to some news, notes, and everything. I think most of you are caught up on a lot of different stuff, but obviously the Bengals have kept a lot of different players in their own building. They've let others walk away. Hayden Hurst walked away. Mitchell Wilcox has walked away. Drew Sample is not under contract at this point, either in the tight end group. And the Bengals are kind of sniffing around some services of available tight ends. Unfortunately, one great one, seemingly on a pretty manageable deal. Dalton Schultz signed a 1-year deal for about $9 million. So we'll have to see exactly what goes on there. The Bengals do have some interest in that position. Bengals kind of missed out on some running backs. Excuse me, by the way, I've got a little bit of a I don't know, I'm fighting something or something. So I'm trying not to clear my throat on the microphone. I apologize if that's bugging you, but I got to do what I got to do. Anyway, Samaje Perine departs for the Bengals. So we've talked about that on the show. Orlando Brown now in the fold at left tackle. So that is official. And so the Bengals are doing a lot of different things in the offensive line. Travion Williams back at the running back position. Obviously, Jesse Bates, Von Bell, they departed in free agency. So the team kind of doing some different things. There's going to be a lot of new faces based on some of the other guys that we've seen from the past couple of years, particularly, on defense, maybe backup offensive line. But they are bringing a lot of competition for the offensive line, particularly for backup spots. I kind of said tongue in cheek this offseason that the Bengals almost need to build 2 starting caliber offensive lines. That's very difficult to do. I know it's easy to say and difficult to do in the NFL, but essentially what I mean by that is, maybe not late round flyer developmental picks as your backups, super young guys. They're getting veterans. They're getting guys who have started games in the NFL, started games for effective teams in the NFL, and they are collecting those guys, particularly ones that can play multiple positions, because they just don't want to have what has happened to them late in their postseason runs the past 2 years. Not have enough able bodies, really kind of grabbing guys and some of there may be some guys that they've tried to work with over the past couple of years. And now they're kind of bringing some more competition there to see exactly what happens. Let's get to it though, and talk about some of these headlines here with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I guess we should start with the offensive line. Max Sharping in the fold. This is kind of both Max Sharping and Nick Scott, the safety of the Rams, in the fold there. Max Sharping, maybe not a big needle moving move for the Bengals, but a guy who can play multiple positions, guard, tackle, stepped in late last year, the whole line played well against the Buffalo Bills, but in that Chiefs game, he and others did have some struggles there, but really epic. It's not really about on-field play. There was a really brief epic shot of Max Sharping. I believe it was his wife and his young son. Snow coming down on him at Buffalo, and he grabs his son from his wife from the stands, and there's kind of an embrace of all of them there. There was a brief moment captured after the game, which was really cool, especially to see how dominant that offensive line performance was that day by the Cincinnati Bengals. So Max Sharping back with the Bengals. Nick Scott now tabbed to replace the departures in the in the safety position. Now there's some talk too that it's actually going to be Nick Scott that's going to be filling in the Jesse Bates role potentially. And it's actually going to be Dax Hill filling in a little bit more in the box type of stuff, maybe stuff a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, slot coverage, that sort of thing. So we'll see exactly what Lou Anarumo wants to do to mix and match those players. Sometimes there's a little bit of multiple roles and whatnot for the safeties on the Cincinnati Bengals. But Nick Scott now in the fold. Obviously, the ascension of Dax Hill is going to be there for the starting position. You kind of just have to figure he was a first-round pick for a reason. The Bengals wanted to, they did not spend premium money at the safety position because they spent premium money on a left tackle, and a good one at that, in Orlando Brown. So that money did go elsewhere at a big signing. And these are a couple more down the road here. Nick Scott seems like he was a guy that, and I'll pin this in the live chat for folks on cincyjungle.com so you can check that out as well here. Let's keep this rolling, though, with some different news. And let's see, where are we going next? Okay, so Orlando Brown, as we've talked about already a couple of times, he has already talked about bonding with Joe Burrow and other facets with his joining of the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is here on Cincy Jungle as well. So some good vibes coming from him. And I will say that the folks that I've been speaking to about his forthcoming appearance tomorrow on the show, he is very excited to be in Cincinnati. That has definitely been expressed to us on that. But here you go. He talked about having lunch so it would have been last Wednesday, I think it says, because he says we had lunch yesterday, and this was back on last Thursday, was when he met with him. Or I guess it was Thursday they had lunch, excuse me. It went really well. I had an opportunity to get him to know him a little bit. It's my first time meeting him. That's kind of ironic, given the fact that these two teams have played each other, Chiefs and Bengals. So, they didn't really get to chat, I guess. He's fired up just like I was, and we sat and talked over cheeseburgers in the hotel room. But I had a bunch of questions about himself and vice versa, Cincinnati as a whole, the system, scheme, coaches, locker room, and all of that. You can tell right away, why he's had the success that he has had. So, again, the Joe Burrow effect kind of taking effect on the free agency spectrum for the Bengals again, impacting a lot of different avenues of this team. Obviously, his own play at quarterback and raising that to another level, raising the offense to another level, but also impacting the Bengals' appeal for outside free agents for sure. All right, James Hawley's asking it. Let's get here, because we talked a little offensive line, and we continue to talk offensive line now with Orlando Brown Jr. getting to know Joe Burrow. Opinion on Jonah requesting a trade, or does he try out the right tackle position? Here's the deal. Let's talk about that. Let's look. And this is okay. So this is from Ian Rappaport. And a report with this, and I'll give my opinion on this a little bit too, because it is a big thing for the team and what it all means for the Cincinnati Bengals and the offensive line. So obviously by now most folks have heard that Jonah Williams, in the wake of Orlando Brown Jr. coming to the Bengals, and it's been made known in that contract and in those negotiations that he was going to be the left tackle. That is, what he wanted out of a contract, among other things, obviously. But that is what he wanted. That is what he got from the Cincinnati Bengals, and thus that moves Jonah Williams. The Bengals' idea, I would assume at this point, would be to move him to right tackle. That seems to be the idea. Jonah Williams, through, I believe, his agent, has openly requested a trade here. So you can see here, quote, this is from Ian Rappaport as of a few days ago. It could happen soon. There are teams that would like to get everything filled before the draft, Rappaport said Friday during an interview on the Pat McAfee show. Quote, that's kind of your goal, right? You want to go into the draft with no holes so you can take the best player available. Cincy is generally pretty reasonable. It could happen today. Well, it has not happened as of this point. There are teams that will be interested. I think, number one, there's a contingent of Bengals fans that do maybe slightly overvalue Jonah Williams a little bit. He's a decent, probably above average when he's fully healthy and everything's working well, an above average NFL left tackle. There are teams, though, that there's not a ton now that are in the market for a left tackle. Orlando Brown, who just left the Chiefs signed Juwan Taylor, a career right tackle, and they're going to play him over at the left. So a lot of teams now that you would think need left tackles would maybe not do that. But then, you're kind of saying, well, are the Bengals going into this free agency period, was left tackle a huge need? Some people would say yes. Some people would say no. Regardless here, there's kind of some discontent, I guess, brewing with Jonah Williams and him, I guess, losing that left tackle spot. But I don't know that it's going to happen. If it hasn't happened, right after that announcement put out there, we'll see what else could come of it. But this could be something that is more a draft weekend trade. And this could be something that, the Bengals at that point, and that may actually work out a little bit more to the Bengals' advantage if it is that way, because there a little bit of a frenzy picks up then as well. If you remember, Hollywood Brown last year got a first-round pick netted for it. So, I mean, the teams kind of get into that frenzy mode again. This kind of, we got to get this guy now. Let's really ramp up the talks again type of mentality like they do in free agency. But as time passes in free agency, that frenzy of the first maybe 1 to 1.5 weeks dies down. Things kind of settle down, and teams kind of are a little bit more deliberate and take more time. So if the Bengals do move him, it might be more closer to draft day or on draft weekend to try and net a pick for that specific weekend. Now, I personally would like to see, even if it's for a year, and even if the Bengals if they do draft a right tackle as well, I would like to see them I would like to see a unit where you would have Orlando Brown at left tackle, Volson, or if that's a position they're mulling over as well, at left guard. You have Karras at center, you have Kappa at right guard, and then you have Jonah Williams at right tackle. Again, compare that line to 2021 when they made the Super Bowl, compared to the one that they trotted out in the AFC Championship game because of all the injuries last year. So I would like to see it. It's just a matter, quite honestly, of if there's how big of a market for Jonah Williams is there. I think if something isn't getting done in, by draft weekend, he's playing right tackle for the Bengals. I would be pretty sure about that at this point. That's just kind of how I feel. I think they'll entertain talks. They'll entertain things, but we'll see exactly what comes of all of that. Antoine, what's going on, my friend? I owe you a text back, dude. I'm going to text you back in just a little bit. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. I apologize I did not get back to you, but what's up, my man? Anyway, let's keep it rolling. Samaje Perine was a guy that I think we are all a little bit surprised left. And it sounded like the Bengals, based on reports, I think it was Paul Dehner Jr., and maybe Jay Morrison of The Athletic. I think they had said, the Bengals were kind of willing to, do a lot of stuff. And here's kind of the report here. Do what was necessary to keep him there in Cincinnati. So they were aggressive in trying to retain Samaje Perine. This is a guy they value. Now, remember, this was one of Zach Taylor's first kind of his guys he brought in. He was a late waiver wire pickup right before the 2019 season. And he played a little bit. I think he played in that opener in Seattle on kick coverage and whatnot. So he was a guy that, you know, Zach Taylor really, really likes. And I know he became a real strong fan favorite last year with a lot of different things here. But yeah, it was Paul Dehner Jr. Of The Athletic, and obviously the great podcast here, that podcast Growling, saying that the Bengals front office wanted him back. But I guess Perine just kind of found a better, avenue for starting, a little bit more notoriety potentially in Denver, where he went for a similar contract. Here's the quote from Dehner. Now with Samaje Perine, they made an aggressive play for, and I think they were surprised that he opted to go to Denver. I think they felt like he was the one they were going to get done. They were willing to go just about anywhere within reason. And of course, it was a 2-year, $7.5 million contract, $3 million guaranteed. I believe also, if I saw on social media, total non sequitur here, but I believe he just had a child as well. So congratulations to him. Obviously, wants to do the best personal decision and business decision for himself. And he felt that Denver was the way to go potentially with that. And maybe that's just because he can, he sees a little bit more playing time and or a higher role there than he would with Cincinnati. Now, what does that mean for Joe Mixon? What does that mean for, are the Bengals drafting? Were they going to draft another high pick at running back? And that was conveyed to him. I don't know. But, that was a guy I think we were all pretty surprised that did not stick around, especially at that number, a guy who filled in really, really well when Joe Mixon was out for a couple of games this last year. So, but the Bengals were aggressive, and that was one of the guys internally that they wanted to keep. So they valued him, and they just couldn't make it happen, unfortunately. So that's the latest with Samaje Perine, the Bengals running back position, and they've got a lot to mull over there as well. Let's go back to Jonah Williams and trade talk. I meant to kind of segue my last spiel into that because this article right here, Frank Pollock has also sounded off on Jonah Williams, and this is an article here. Okay. Frank Pollock comments on Jonah Williams following the trade. Quote, he's a smart player. He's a really good player in that regard. I think he should have no problem making the switch, obviously from left tackle to right tackle. Getting over doing that with reps and constraints. There's a whole offseason. Guys have asked to do that all the time. Quote, there's a little bit of a transition going left to right, but I'd say it'd be a little bit smoother than going from tackle to guard. But he's a good player. He's smart. He's athletic. He understands what he does best, and he's a technician type of player. I think he can do it. Now, that's part of the problem also, I think, that I didn't really address. And, I don't think many people, I think people observe it or understand it, but I think they also kind of gloss over it a little bit, that this is not, just this is not just a little bit of a, I'll slide over and, there's no learning curve, even as a guy who's entering year 5. But it also, obviously they felt that in bringing Orlando Brown Jr. over and just saying, Jonah can go to right tackle, they feel that is not going to be a huge steep learning curve for a guy like Jonah Williams. But this could also play into Jonah Williams is not real. It's not so much the respect, maybe potentially in his mind. I don't know. I'm just speculating. It may not be all about the respect level of being left tackle or being right tackle. It may more just be, man, there is a little bit of a transition there, and in a contract year with the Bengals, I don't know that I really want to move over and maybe have some bumps along the way, not have my greatest season as I go look to have, my next big contract on the open market the following year. And maybe it diminishes his value, not so much because he plays right tackle instead of left, but because it's a transitional year and he doesn't have as strong of a year as he could have as a left tackle. So that may be a little bit in the line of thinking with Jonah Williams, kind of thinking a little bit beyond this year. Not so much, I don't want to play right tackle. It's more, what if it's going to be a little bit of a transition for me, and I don't know what that's going to mean, translating on the field and what that means for my next contract. That could all play into this with Jonah Williams. So let's Obviously we have to kind of see how this all plays out, but Frank Pollock seems to be pretty confident in a guy like Jonah Williams getting out there and, playing right tackle. I think I know that in an ideal world, I think we would all kind of say, hey, let's, based on him being one of the 5 best offensive linemen on this team, Jonah Williams, you would want him out there starting at right tackle, even though that's not a position he hasn't played since high school, early in freshman year of Alabama. So it's been a long time since he's been out there. But I kind of think there's more than just the luster of being left tackle and right tackle as it goes with Jonah Williams and him potentially requesting a trade. So let's cruise on, because the Bengals, we've talked Orlando Brown, we've talked Max Sharping, and there's another offensive lineman, and a guy that, if you've been a fan of the Bengals for at least a handful of years, a guy that, people talked about when he was coming out in the draft. People thought that this was a good fit for the Bengals when they were, getting out there and, redoing their offensive line a handful of years ago. Cody Ford finally joins the Bengals after a stint in being drafted by the Buffalo Bills. And then, of course, a brief stint with the Arizona Cardinals. He's a guy that has played, 3 or 4 different positions, I believe. It was tackle, right guard. Let me just double check the notes here. Right tackle, left guard, right guard, and just offensive line in Arizona. Only started 3 games last year. Hasn't started basically a full season since 2019. Started all 7 games he played in 2020, but started only 7 of 15 games in 21 with the Bills, and then 3 of 11 games last year for the Cardinals. So a guy that, brings versatility and a guy they're familiar with. Here's the other thing. I've seen a couple of other people mention this in the live chat as well, but obviously you look at it and you say, okay, Orlando Brown, Cody Ford, Joe Mixon, you would have had Samaje Perine. These are all guys that played together at Oklahoma in overlapping seasons. So obviously in terms of, scheme and familiarity and knowing what those running backs like to do, their running style, all of that kind of all makes sense in a way, because there's a little bit of past familiarity, past cohesion with that. So that is, another guy that they're bringing in. And look, he had like a 41.2 or 41.3 PFF score last year overall. Not obviously overly impressive with that, but he's a guy who started games in the NFL, has been on some good teams and played in high profile games. Here's the other thing with it. A lot of people were, is this guy going to be the starter at right tackle? Is this what they're thinking of doing? Well, if it is, I'll put this up for you. If it is, here's Aaron Wilson, a guy who covers the NFL, and he's got some good insider knowledge on a lot of stuff. The reported contract is for a year, $1.08 million. So it is a minimal contract, one that definitely screams backup and or emergency type of guy. And who knows if Jonah Williams is dealt during the draft, up to the draft, that sort of thing. The Bengals then, even though he's not the ideal right tackle as a starter at this point, when we look at things right now and based on his past history in the pros, at least the Bengals aren't going in necessarily with an absolute pressing need, gigantic hole at right tackle. I mean, you would think that would obviously be a pick within the first 2 rounds, be it right tackle, but they have a placeholder there and a veteran one who has played snaps, albeit an up and down pro career at this point. But again, there's kind of the Oklahoma system familiarity from a handful of years ago. And then, if you do deal Jonah Williams, you've got a veteran guy who has played right tackle in the league, at least right now, to be there. And then, oh, by the way, there's still a decision to be made with all kinds of other players on this roster too. So we will see exactly what goes on here. But still, Cody Ford, good backup, a guy also, you get a guy that gets hurt and you need him for a game or two. I mean, he can fill in and at guard, at tackle, and get by with a game or two, especially when you look at, if you do keep Jonah Williams, he's had injuries, right? I mean, last year he had injury to Kappa, and yeah, Karras had. I mean, I know Cody Ford's. You wouldn't look at him as center, but Karras had. I mean, injuries happen even if they're short term, and you need valuable swing guys who have NFL starting experience, and Cody Ford brings that. So let's keep rolling on, and I appreciate all the comments trying to sort through a lot of different stuff here. And the next is, again, I guess this is Joe Burrow effect. I don't know, or just a team that is winning games and going far and all of that. The Bengals beat out a couple of teams for the services of Nick Scott, the new safety. And so right here is the article that I will pin here. Good question by Will, by the way. That brings up the question: who's better, Brown or Hill as the backup center? I think the Bengals really like Trey Hill, but we'll kind of see how all of that comes about. That's the one, and I'm really curious too, not only at center and what they do maybe with the backup situation there, but I'm really curious to know, what they're going to look at doing at left guard, because now you're collecting right tackles, and you got Jonah to figure out, Collins, all this kind of stuff, and you bring Cody Ford into the mix. So there's all these guys at right tackle, but what, is there going to be a competition at left guard? Are they confident that Volson, who had a lot of nice moments last year, but again, there was a little bit of a mixed bag. Is there going to be competition there? Interesting question, though, on the offensive line. And of course, the most important one, because the offensive line has kind of been the Achilles heel late in the seasons for the Bengals. But this is got to be, if you have been a fan of the Cincinnati Bengals for a really long time, this has got to be music to your ears here. When you see the Bengals beat out several teams for, he wasn't the top safety on the market, but a coveted guy out there. And the Bengals beating out teams in external free agency was something that almost never happened in previous years. First of all, the deal reported there is a 3-year, $12 million deal, $3 million signing bonus, $4.4 million first-year compensation. The Rams were in on him to keep him. The Broncos, the Bucks, a lot of teams were interested in him, but the Bengals won out. Not only reputation, maybe a little bit of different finances, getting creative with the contracts and putting forth some early money and other guarantees that they haven't always done. So kudos to the Bengals again. Another guy that the Rams and their fans seem to like, Nick Scott, as well. You're potentially taking, as you look at it on paper and what Jesse Bates and Von Bell gave you, you're looking at an unproven guy in his second year in Dax Hill and Nick Scott coming in here. I think they both bring athleticism and heady play and physical play, but it's going to be tough to overcome what Bates and Bell gave you over the course of the last handful of years together. So these guys have big shoes to fill, do Scott and Hill, but the Bengals fought off a couple of different teams to get him in Cincinnati, and that's kind of a refreshing thing to hear for sure. Now, tight end, that seems to be still the glaring issue for the Cincinnati Bengals and their roster. They are undoubtedly wanting to bring someone in the mix, a veteran, multiple veterans, that sort of thing. And here is the link to this article where the Bengals are hosting, or had hosted, Foster Moreau, a guy who played with Joe Burrow at LSU, and then Cethan Carter, guy that familiar name for sure. Familiar name. I like this comment here, going back a step, by the way, from Anton. Team speed improves with Scott and Hill. We'll see if they can play as well. Yeah, and I think that's just been an emphasis. And by the way, we're not even talking about Tyson Anderson potentially coming into the mix, a guy who has a really good athletic profile. I think, you have to remember Bates, while he was, a really good player for this team, he was one of the few Marvin Lewis holdovers that this team has retained, or had retained, and did so for a number of years. So, wasn't a Zach guy per se. Bell, not a speedy guy, but a guy who made a lot of plays for the Bengals. And I just think that I've said this before. I think the Bengals are looking to alter a little bit of things on their roster in terms of athletic profiles. Really look at the testing and the measurables of players and see how that plays into things. So it's an interesting point there by Anton. But Bengals host Foster Moreau and Cethan Carter for visits. Cethan Carter, special teams guru for the Bengals. But those are a couple of guys that they're looking at. And we're going to get to a couple of mock drafts that came out on a couple of different platforms as well. And those brought about a couple of interesting and intriguing options for the Bengals. But the Bengals are doing their due diligence here as of Tuesday afternoonish evening for folks. I don't believe that Foster Moreau has been scooped up at this point. I'll look. I did a quick look before taking the air, so I don't think he's been scooped up at this point. I know he's been flirting with a couple of different teams here, so we'll see what happens. And does he go back and play with his college quarterback, or other options here? But Carter was a guy that was special teams, and I think his last year with the Bengals, he had a little bit of a higher profile role because of injuries and stuff. So a guy obviously the Bengals are familiar with for sure. All right, before we get to a couple of other, and by the way, we're going to get to our first mock draft tomorrow night, John Sheeran and myself. We haven't done one of those yet, so we'll get to that for you tomorrow, along with a special guest. We'll remind you about it at the end of the show as well. But I want to remind folks before I get to these mock drafts, and then we're going to scoot on out of here. But this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Click the show icon, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. If you like what we're doing on this, give us a thumbs up if you could. That helps us out a bit. And of course, if you can subscribe, if you like all the different stuff we're bringing you, we appreciate that. And of course, on the audio side, you can subscribe through your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We're on there. Our show, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk with Matt Minnick, and Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, as well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. Cool new show that we're popping out for you, and hopefully you are enjoying all of the different options, trying to get you Bengals stuff through the off season, most of the days of the week, if not every day of the week. So hopefully you enjoy it, and subscribe, like if you can. Appreciate it. All right, let's get to mock drafts. Man, I feel like I'm not a lot of people put out like mock draft. They do their, either it's, Twitter mock drafts, or, specific days of the week I'm putting out a mock draft. We lag on that. I don't know. If you guys want more of those, we can do more. John and I try not to do a ton of them, but we can do more if you guys eat those up. I don't know. You tell me. All right, let's go. This one came out. This is from Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network. Great guy, sharp, and knows his stuff. It's his third version on NFL.com of the mock draft. And of course, he's got the 2 quarterbacks, and people go back and forth on who's going first, who's not. Bryce Young of Alabama, CJ Stroud of Ohio State going to Carolina, and Houston to top this up. And then, of course, Will Anderson going to Arizona. So top 5, Colts going with Anthony Richardson, another quarterback out of Florida there. Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle, going in the top 5 to Seattle, and then Devin Witherspoon there. So let's get down here, and we'll start let's see if we can get to some of the – just want to make sure I didn't skip. All right. So we'll get to some of the AFC North teams and other notable situations here. Here he has Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah, guy I'm really high on, going to Washington at pick 16. That is really high. He's got the Steelers taking Broderick Jones, the Georgia offensive tackle, young guy, but big guy for them. He's got the Lions taking Kalijah Cansey. I know a lot of Bengals fans like him. Will Levis, the Kentucky quarterback, kind of a somewhat local kid, going to Tampa Bay, providing an interesting scenario there. Seahawks getting my guy, USC wide receiver Jordan Addison. Ravens getting shocking a quarterback. Joey Porter Jr. would stay in the division. Wow, that would just be a lot of different emotions going with that one. And then you go down here to the Bengals, and they've got the Bills taking Quentin Johnson, a wide receiver at 27. The Bengals here, Darnell Wright. And I think a lot of folks would like that pick, particularly if Jonah Williams gets dealt. I think this is where a free agent, or excuse me, a draft weekend trade for Jonah Williams also makes sense, potentially for the Bengals. They could potentially see how the board falls during the first night, see how many picks of the offensive tackles they can get, see who may be available. If there's a run on tackles earlier in the night, maybe that alters how they view that entire situation. And if same goes for the vice versa, right? If there's still a lot of them available, maybe they feel, hey, we can get a Darnell Wright, plug him and play him right now. Jonah Williams, we can deal that and get, potentially get that final year of the contract off the books there. That would provide an interesting scenario for the Bengals for sure. But Darnell Wright, the Tennessee tackle, I think a lot of folks would like that pick for a number of reasons. And that is where Jeremiah had the first round going for the Bengals. And then this one is from Pete Prisco of CBS Sports, a guy who, he's always pretty complimentary of the Bengals over the years, even during, some of the Andy Dalton years and all of that. His first mock draft, and he too has the quarterbacks going early here. We'll scroll down. He has Bryce Young going number 1, CJ Stroud going 2, Will Anderson. I mean, this is almost carbon copy, except look at this. He's got Will Levis going 4 to the Colts, and then Richard. So he's got 4 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks going in this iteration of the mock draft, his first one. And we're going to scroll down here. He's got Bijan Robinson going to the Cowboys at 26. Let's scroll up here. Zay Flowers, a wide receiver from BC, going to Baltimore. Steelers are up here, I think. He's got Michael Mayer going to the Lions at 18, and Devin Witherspoon, a corner from Illinois, going to the Steelers at 17. And then, of course, as we scroll down, let's go to the Bengals. They are taking Dalton Kincaid at the end of the first round here, with Mayer already off the board in this scenario. So again, this may change, but you could get a Foster Moreau and then potentially get a Kincaid, or you can do a lot of different things here. Potentially, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, they need multiple tight ends though. They need multiple tight ends, and so that I think that pick they didn't address it last year, and I think part of the reason they didn't is because one guy they liked a lot, pardon the pun with the name, Isaiah Likely, a guy who was from Coastal Carolina and went to the Ravens and ended up, having a decent rookie year with the Ravens. That was a guy they had in for a pre-draft visit, and, they kind of looked at a couple of tight ends and they just did not grab one. And so now, all of these contracts came up this year, and so they got to really revamp this position group. And so this is where Pete Prisco has the Bengals going in the first round. So Kincaid is one of the more polarizing guys as a tight end in this class for a lot of Bengals fans, it seems, because, some people don't like the fact that he's not a great blocker. We broke him down a couple of weeks ago on this show. Go check out our draft preview of him. He's a guy who catches everything, runs a lot of different routes. He is effort. Go check it out. He's a good player. He's a good player. I promise you. All right. We're going to get on out of here. Just want to remind folks, again, we've got tentatively Mr. Orlando Brown Jr. set to join us tomorrow night on our big show. We're going to talk with him. We're going to do our first mock draft. So we're pretty excited about that. Hopefully everything still lines up the way it's currently set up with that, but we're excited about it. He is excited about being in Cincinnati. I know that. And so pretty cool that we'll be chatting with him and looking forward to that. But anyway, you all, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in live. We got a lot of live viewers here on a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening. I know there are a lot of great podcast options out there, particularly as it goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. And I always want to make sure that you all know how grateful I am that you tune into this show. You keep it to Cincy Jungle. You hang out with John Sheeran and myself. We appreciate all the support, and we'll keep hammering you with content. I promise. Take care. That's the news, notes, and a little bit of opinion on them. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We'll see you tomorrow for a big show.